I'm joined today by Solomon Khan, who's a former fellow at the Harvard University Safra Center for Ethics, who has built a tool to explore who is giving money to national politicians. His day job is running the data team at Paperless Post. So on this show, we talk about campaign finance and donations all the time. Tell us a little bit about how your tool will work. Your Kickstarter campaign is almost fully funded for this, last I checked. How will the tool work?
So the tool sits on top of Open Secrets Data, which is an organization that collects and cleans data from the FEC. And what will allow anyone to do is both to understand the full context of how a politician raises money, and then also allows them the flexibility to go through the very detailed views of exactly who they're raising it from.
So explain the full context. I mean, people may know sort of anecdotally about, oh, sometimes there's super PAC contributions and then individuals can donate. And so talk to us about what that full context is.
Yes. So on the main page of the visualization, what people can do is they can see how much money a candidate raised from different sectors across different campaign cycles. So you can see if your candidate 10 years ago raised $1 million and is now raising $10 million. Your congressional candidate. You can split that, and on the page you can see how much of that comes from the financial sector, how much of that comes from the labor sector, how much of it comes from health, how much of it comes from super PACs or independent expenditures against their opponents. And you can see how much comes, you can split that data for individuals only, PACs only, or combined. And then you can also see all of that data in total or percent. So it's just a very clean visual way of taking something very complex, but putting it all in one chart that lets you see, okay, actually, this is what's actually happening in money in politics. Instead of now, I feel like most people know that there's way too much money in politics, but if asked to be specific about, so exactly how much is your congressperson raising, they could never answer that question.
So you talked about how the platform, the tool will work based on the data from Open Secrets. I'm curious whether you've thought of, and I'm guessing this would be a more qualitative analysis that may not be as automatable. When we were talking about net neutrality, for example, there was a connection between the money received from cable companies and their lobbyists by politicians and what their position and votes were with regard to net neutrality. So it would be fascinating if I could pull up, here are the donations over time for this individual from the oil industry, and here's how they voted with regard to legislation.
Yeah, so that gets into the other side of this visualization, which are the detailed views. So once you see on the main page those individual sectors, you can actually click on them to see every company from an election cycle from the energy industry. How much have they given to that particular candidate, or how much from the telecommunications industry? And you can see, oh, Comcast gave X amount of money. And then beyond that even, and this is where you get details that go beyond what most people, I think, expect of the tools that they currently use. You can actually even click on Comcast to see every single donation that someone working at Comcast has ever given to that candidate. So you can see the context for the relationship between a particular company and a particular candidate. And one of the features that is on the roadmap after launching this is to also pull in that voting data. So to see on the same visualization how much money a candidate raised from whom, and then how did they vote.
So let's talk a little bit about types of contributions and secrecy and privacy. There are ways that the massively wealthy can sort of follow the letter of a lot of the campaign finance disclosure laws, but not the spirit, and keep their spending essentially secret. Talk to us about that context. Are there some contributions that are, the detail of which is sort of beyond the data you're able to access?
Yes. So I will give the perfect example. I would say that the probably most well-known PAC or super PAC type of, even though it ended up being a nonprofit, like when in my mind, before I knew all the details, I was always excited to see like what actually happened with those Swift boat ads against John Kerry right at the end of the presidential election. And because to me, those were the most pressing example of like an outside group coming in and spending a significant amount of money and making just an enormous difference in the history of this country. And so I was so excited. I built this tool, and then I went to go look at John Kerry and look at the attack ads that were paid for against him, and I didn't see them. And I said, there must be something wrong. It's impossible that the most famous attack ads by a PAC ever to have existed in the United States were just missing, but they are, because that organization was technically a nonprofit, not a political action committee. And the people who donated to that nonprofit and the communication that they did were not disclosed to the FEC. And so we still don't have answers about, I think, the exact specifics behind that. Like, that's not in the FEC data. And to me, that's just the biggest example of something that we should know about campaign finance, about who's spending money to influence our elections, and we don't know it.
And over time, we know that in the aggregate, you hear, oh, this is the first $100 million campaign. This is the first $1 billion campaign. So the absolute numbers in terms of money in politics are clearly growing. But have you looked at inflation adjusted? Is this something that is getting worse and worse?
I have not looked at inflation adjusted, because you don't need to look at the inflation adjusted numbers to know that, yes, it's gotten monumentally worse. If you look back at Bill Clinton in the 90s, he, in order to win the presidential election, raised under $33 million.
Seems like nothing now.
It is nothing now. Especially now, we're thinking that the candidate who ultimately wins the presidential election is going to have raised over around $2 billion. And that's the $2 billion versus 33 million is just such a different order of magnitude that inflation is a joke. You don't need inflation to know that the problem has just morphed to a level that people would be shocked. And this is one of the things that I wrote about in that AMA. I think that people are operating as if money in politics has always been a problem, which I agree that it has. And because people have always complained about money in politics, complaining about money in politics now, you don't get the same sense of the different scope of the problem. I think also people aren't able to as accurately judge the difference between, 33 million is a really big number, 2 billion is a really big number. It just all sounds like a lot of money to me. But when you look at what actually you need to do and who you need to raise money from in order to raise that much more money, it's just shocking. It's just such a huge difference, and it's just gotten so much worse.
With regard to 2016 and the limited time we have left, I'd love for you to comment on what we're seeing some candidates do. Hillary Clinton did this for a period. We have Scott Walker and Jeb Bush doing it on the Republican side, which is raising money pretty clearly for the purposes of a campaign that has not yet formally started. How does that impact what data we can get about those contributions?
I mean, at the moment, we don't have data about those contributions. If you looked up on the FEC website, if you looked up Jeb Bush on the FEC website, you would get no results. He's not there because he doesn't need to report anything to the FEC, so we have no idea what's going on. And I think that, the reason these candidates are not breaking the law as far as the letter of the law, but as far as the spirit of the law, that the American people should know what its candidates for office are doing while they're doing fundraising. I would say that's super important, and they just don't care.
And there's no rule that says that once they declare, they have to sort of retroactively disclose donations or nothing like that. The donations Jeb Bush gets now, we will just not know about.
There are people who are more experts on this particular behavior than I am. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work, because one of the things that you can't do when you are a candidate is be in collaboration with these super PACs. So the way super PACs operate is that they have to be completely independent from your campaign. And so if there is no campaign and you're helping out a super PAC, then you're still completely independent from a campaign. I'm not sure the degree to which you need to report that after you after you become a candidate if you had previously helped a super PAC before you were a candidate. I think that there are other people who would know the specifics of that more, but that's something that I want to learn more about.
We've been speaking with Solomon Khan. Where can people find out more about this tool you're developing?
Sure, they can check it out at explorecampaignfinance.com, and if you just search for Explore Campaign Finance on Kickstarter, you'll see it.